Um, so, SoReady, I think everyone knows that SoReady is primarily focused on business recovery. That's what our role is. And so everything that I speak to is really built around that. In April of this year, we actually hired Terrell Roper, who's also on the call, through an EDA grant, the Department of Commerce, to help him be in the business community, reaching out to businesses as our disaster liaison. In that time, April through September, which is when we made our first report to EDA, he made 104 business outreach calls to multiple businesses in each of the 3 primary jurisdictions, Talent, Phoenix, and also Jackson County, the unincorporated portions impacted by the fire. And what we know is that 17 businesses are committed to rebuilding at this point. And then we know that more will be coming, but what we know is that there's a lot of cleanup already done that's going to allow for that. Of course, that had to happen first, but I'm amazed at the progress that Terrell has made, and I'm grateful to him on staff. And then also during this time, I think most of you are aware that the United Rotary Clubs of Southern Oregon had some fire funds available, and we already were the grant administrators for that. We put up the portal for the applications, we vetted the applications, and then we made the distribution in terms of the actual checks to Rotary members who hand delivered them. And that was about 60 business grants. I'm not sure if it was 57 or 58 or 59, but almost 60, and about $180,000 funding out to small businesses to replace tools and other equipment they may have lost in the fire. So that's my quick and short summary of what we've been up to so far.
Thank you. Thank you. Marta, what does it look like from your perspective?
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen because this is a lot of government speak to follow. So I'm the Regional Development Officer of the State Economic Development Agency. We do not focus on individual assistance. We focused on community assistance because that's where our tools are. And so I will not bore you with dollar numbers and figures because some contracts are in amendment phase right now. But between what you're seeing, like among what you're seeing on the screen right now, we're talking millions directed to Jackson County communities alone. I couldn't do what I do alone. So huge shout out, of course, to SoReady, Alex Campbell, everybody on this call, the entire R3V group, and all the communities listed at the very bottom, the cities and the counties. Our special public works fund in the initial recovery phase provided 25% match for FEMA public assistance. Then we had the legislature allocated and authorized municipal wildfire capacity assistance program. Representative Marsh was instrumental in making that happen. And this is helping communities that are listed at the bottom. Actually, that particular program is Jackson County, Talent, and Phoenix, and Shady Cove. It helped them access whatever services they identified were crucial, whether in-house or consultants, to navigate other federal resources or state resources. Again, something that could not be possible without Representative Marsh advocating and changing a rule at the state level that would allow for this award to be made and actually be deployed. Whispering Pines Mobile Home Park, which was having major issues, say drinking water, you couldn't rebuild, recover. They're going to be getting annexed into Charlotte and Water District. That's at least a $300,000 award from OHA, Oregon Health Authority's funding that we worked on. And something that I'm currently working on is exploring emergency match funding opportunities as cities and counties look at FEMA's hazard mitigation grant program. And huge shout out to everybody on this call, but also to RV-COG, because RV-COG's team is crucial in helping Butte Falls, which is in a very, very vulnerable position, right? They're surrounded by timber. If you've driven out there, you saw how close open chain fire got to them. RV-COG's team is helping Butte Falls navigate that hazard mitigation grant program specifically. And it's just been humbling and amazing working with all of the communities listed below. So that's what's happening right now. The Whispering Pines Mobile Home Park Award is just about a month old, so it's still pretty recent. Thank you.
Great, Marta, thank you very much. I actually want to point something out because we've talked about zone captains so many times, and this is a case where zone captains elevated a need, and within days, Representative Marsh and the whole team were able to make that Whispering Pines water connection happen and water purity issue resolved. So amazing to see the community and kind of some of the structures that we've been building working. So thank you, Marta. Let's see, Marshall, I think you're next on our list.
Great. So the SBDC was very intimately involved with delivering the federal component from the SBA, at least some of the lending products, whether it be PPP and or EIDL for the disaster relief. The PPP, of course, having the ability to be forgiven. So that would end up being, in effect, grant monies to individual businesses. And so that the PPP is really a whole new facet of relief delivery, if you will, for businesses that are affected negatively by problems. And so the standard, if you will, SBA response is through the EIDL program, the Economic Injury Disaster Loans, which are our loans. They did have some forgivable pieces to those loans, which were kind of interesting. So the whole landscape changed with COVID and with the fires right after. And and then of course there was a specific EIDL for the fires themselves. So we had a whole lot of resources thrown into this area, and we've been spending our time trying to sift through that and to make that one-on-one match between businesses and provide the technical assistance to those businesses so that they have successful applications, and even more importantly to them, successful forgiveness applications. I think I want to highlight one thing. And so we did a project, and it's on behalf of really all the service providers, but worked very closely with Marta in delivering a number of webinars. And one of the webinars, Marta made the connections with the, I guess, survivors and surviving entities from the Car Fire in California, economic development and whatnot. And they were recounting their experiences with fire recovery and looking around this valley, looking at the amount of aid going in, the speed at the recovery, the amount of building going on. It's just mind-boggling to me when I start comparing it to what we were hearing in that that presentation. And so I don't know if that's your view, Marta. I kind of hate to call you out right now, but I'm so impressed with this area, the resiliency of the people, the willing to fight to rebuild. And so I think that in all respects for the devastation that's happened, this area has really shown itself to be strong and resilient. So our contact with the different businesses lately, we're ongoing. In some respects, we're just entering into working with fire victims, just for the fact that fire victims, number one, were working to receive housing if they were victims of both personal, residential, and business burnouts, which we're hearing more and more cases. But so to me, it's been kind of a hierarchy where housing first, and then working with insurance companies and FEMA, the different businesses. It takes a while to process that to where they get an understanding of what resources they have, getting the cleanups going. And now we're seeing that people are making decisions, whether they are taking those funds and purchasing businesses out in other areas, whether they are going to revamp their operations and build or not build. And several are looking at ways that they can exit right now, unfortunately. I think it's kind of a mixture in this case between the fire victims and ongoing pandemic problems and the responses, the economic response. So it's all over the board as far as we're seeing. A lot of different issues, not very many in every category, so I can't give you the top 5 categories or anything. Last thing that I think is just really outstanding, and unfortunately it's in a negative sense, is that there were so many small childcare businesses that were housed within residential housing that was lost. And so the childcare industry has been devastated in many respects down here. And it's that will take a long time to replace that resource. And that's really needed, as both economic development and small business development people know, in terms of being able to get people back to work. So pretty complex puzzle, but I'm again just really impressed with the resiliency of this area.
Thank you, Marshall. Yeah, you're so I'm curious if you have any insight into the fact that like Terrell's reached out to over 100 businesses that were affected by the fire, but we have data on 17 coming back. Is anybody tracking that? I know Tucker may have something to say about that in a couple of minutes, but I'm just wondering, Marshall, if you have any data, is that part of what you do?
Well, we have a lot of data, but not that specifically. And in fact, on a personal basis, people will come to us for reasons, certain issues. And through the interview process, sometimes we discover well into it that, oh, by the way, I'm a fire victim and I could do that, but I don't have a home anymore. And so it's a more of a discovery process with us. And so codifying that data, we don't have. We can give you gross numbers on a lot of categories for our normal reporting, but not for this specifically, unfortunately.
Yeah, and they're probably not coming to you unless they're wanting to restart, right? So you're not even going to get.
Or, I mean, there are a lot of different reasons, but typically, yes, wanting to restart or rebuild. And, but in some cases, it's wanting to exit, still have some assets and want to retain value for those assets.
And then the childcare issue, I think that we will be hosting a discussion in the new year on that because Paula Hyatt, who's an Ashland city councilor, is very interested, and she's been digging deep into this process. So we're going to have kind of a summit on daycare and how can we rebuild that. So thank you for bringing that up. It does seem to be a real need. John Lagarza, do you want to go next?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, thank you, Stefan. Well, the Urban Renewal Agency, as everyone knows, has been quite busy really working with their partnership with the Phoenix Talent School District with the Gateway site in at the entrance to Talent there. That was just recently last month, had the ribbon cutting, and we really appreciate all the partners that helped us be able to fund that site and be able to move forward, especially with OHCS, with Kim Travis, who just was a phenomenal partner helping us move that milestone forward and just trying to bring families back into the community there. So that was huge. There's still a long ways to go. I think, as everyone recognizes, you drive up and down the 99 corridor and you start to see some of these KOA man camps that we have outside our city limits, and just the opportunity, the need for housing, as we've all mentioned here, workforce housing, affordable housing. We have to try and figure out how to solve that problem as we go through the recovery. We're in the second inning of a 9-inning challenge here, trying to be able to provide that housing there. So some of the exciting things I think that we're excited to see is with the TGM grant on the 99 corridor there, looking at that corridor, at the opportunities, and really, what's that zoning going to look like for the commercial residential component there, and how we rebuild through there. Talent lost over 50 businesses, and
I think we lost John.
Oh, I was hoping that wasn't me. Okay, well, John will jump back in. Let's see. So, Tucker, are you there? While we wait for John to jump back in?
I am. I'd love to see if he's able to. Did he get dropped out entirely?
His video is black and he froze on my side. Yeah, he's jumped out, so he'll be back in a minute.
Well, sure. I was really interested in hearing what he had to say more.
Well, we'll let him finish.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess a year ago, when we started sitting in the SOWORT discussions when we were working on the economic recovery plan, that was early days, and if you said I was going to be, talking about economic recovery, sort of from our perspective, I would have been fairly surprised. But I think that's the nature of recovery work. It's very flexible and it moves in very different directions, as we know, sort of by being here in all these R3V meetings. So, as many of you know, the Zone Captains program essentially elevates fire survivors into some of the discussions that are happening around the recovery, doing things like assessing community needs, assessing individual needs, but also, since we broke up that map to create the various, Alameda fire zones by development type, there are a number of those zones that, veer into the commercial aspect of things, such as Highway 99, of course, and then the central business districts of Talent and Phoenix. So it includes more than just mobile home parks or single family residential or rural residential, but also those commercial structures. So as we are engaging with the businesses that are there, we have to think about how to elevate those impacted businesses into the discussion. So, of course, we want to do this in a really coordinated way, and so the first question is, how do you engage and join the existing sort of, entities such as So Ready, Business Oregon, chambers of commerce, et cetera, part of the top-down recovery agencies, to understand the resources that are there, as well as what sorts of mechanisms of support might already be in place to support that bottom-up community effort. So as we engage with those impacted businesses who are interested in taking part in the recovery work and really understanding what's out there, we also wanted to make sure that we're engaging all the existing partners. So just in the interest of being really well coordinated at this point. So we've had meetings with So Ready, of course, and Terrell and Marta, and I just had lunch today with Christina from Pacific Power and Eli from the Medford Chamber to make sure what resources are there for those impacted businesses as they seek to coalesce around some of these questions. We were reached out to by one of the Phoenix businesses that was impacted, very interested in trying to start some sort of small chamber or a DMO, which is a destination marketing organization there in Phoenix, and asking how it could be held by the people already working in economic recovery or even economic growth. And of course, my theory is it's always worth taking the wider view. So the first question we have to ask is, if Phoenix businesses are expressing desire for a chamber, well, what about talent? Is that something that those businesses might be interested in? Can this desire be expressed or held and supported by the community across jurisdictional boundaries, just like the fire burned? Or does it need to be built in place to serve that localized environment? So that's certainly a question we're just now starting to ask. It's worth mentioning we have interest from impacted business owners or property owners that were commercially zoned in both Talent and Phoenix as far as potentially serving with the program. But even more widely, and I think this has been mentioned by some of the panelists before, we need to work on getting our heads around the economic recovery discussion and the questions and how it interfaces with the whole wildfire recovery. How do they relate? And we need to, I feel like, start thinking about that more concretely and deeply, just when you start thinking about the numbers involved. Of course, you have the statewide 422 million, I think, in community development block grants. You have the TGM, the Transportation Growth Management Plan, which I don't have numbers for now, but I know that it might be worth going back to Josh LeBombard and asking for an update now that I believe a contractor's been assigned there. And then you have the whole other pot of funding related to ARPA, the American Rescue Plan, as those funds, which do give a lot of resources to rural towns, or potentially as all that sort of really big funding comes into play, how can wildfire recovery as well also serve the really deep economic recovery topics that are being talked about nationally as far as COVID, but in our localized environment, it feels like a rising tide that might be able to lift a lot of boats. So that's some of the questions we want to engage with here at R3V, at the LTRG, and as well as just sort of as we try to help survivors and impacted businesses into that discussion framework. Let's frame it and think big and think about how we can do some real good work as far as our valley is concerned. So that's kind of my little spiel there. And then as far as the dashboard goes, yeah, I mean, working with the data that the dashboard's going to be public next week, I believe, fingers crossed, and working with Marta and some of the great work that Marta and Terrell and others have done early on, reaching out to businesses. We want to see if we can potentially continue that work and get a real good visualized real-time version of how those businesses are building back or not, and then potentially be able to do side-by-side comparisons and figure out if there's a missing middle, because we know that Business Oregon's been just super crucial in meeting some really important gaps, and I think economic recovery is definitely something that they'll stay engaged with. So huge shout out to Marta as always.
Great, thank you, Tucker, and welcome back, John. Let's have you continue. You're talking about the gateway.
Oh, is that where I've dropped off? I was talking about oh my gosh, I've talked, sorry about that, apologize. But I was just saying, some exciting things just wanted to echo on the TGM grant. I think that's going to create some opportunities to look at that 99 corridor, how that could be better improved. As I mentioned, on that corridor, Talent lost over 50 businesses, so, and we're hearing again, the challenges with replacement costs, labor participation, wanting to look at whether they rebuild or exit. So I think, it is an important time that we engage that corridor and have them participating in these conversations. Some of the, the things that Talent has been doing is, with the help of Pacific Power, was able to get a grant for looking at a downtown business association. So if you look at, Oregon has a great Main Street program. Phenomenally, our cities have done a great job in the state of Oregon of being nominated for, best downtown businesses for Main Street program. The Main Street program, is a nationwide program that has really some great 4 pillars, but has gone through areas where there's been natural disasters in Louisiana, Mississippi. So they have a great, opportunity to help some of our small communities looking at how to rebuild and some recovery programs for our businesses that we should look at leveraging those resources and helping from that standpoint. Again, childcare, same as the workforce, affordable housing. We know we got those challenges, but we got to start looking and becoming more creative on looking at solutions. There was a great article in Business Oregon with Boardman Foods looking at how bringing companies together and how to try and create that participation and try to have some childcare facilities on your sites, right? So looking at some of your city and county business codes, right? Look at Siemens Mentor Graphics in Wilsonville, where they're bringing in childcare on the facilities. We have to be able to reach out to these businesses, work with our community development people, find a way to create that blended opportunity, for childcare too. So I think those are some things as we look forward in this recovery process that are going to be important to have those conversations with small and large businesses. And, we got to, again, around the housing too at the same time there. So.
That's great. Thank you, John. A couple of questions. One was in the chat from Denise Balkus at FEMA. How many residents do you have in the gateway now? I know you have trailers have been arriving.
Yeah, we still have another 6 trailers coming in. Then we'll have 53 trailers, and the spot is being managed by Rogue Retreat, and they're slowly moving the folks in from different areas within the community. So eventually there'll be 53 families there. So again, as I talk, you go up and down the 99 corridor. We got KOA man camps outside of the city boundaries. We're also hearing too, I think everyone recognizes this on the panel, is that, the ability to bring product back in when you lose 22 manufactured parks, right? That creates a huge deficit. And we're hearing from the manufacturers, you're looking at anywhere from 12 to 18 months to 2 years to be able to bring in housing. So we really need to understand that full supply line, and how soon are we going to be able to bring back affordable housing, workforce housing, senior housing? All that's important in our communities, So just that's going to be a challenge as we go forward to be solving that problem too. So they both go hand in hand. We got to have housing for people to live in, be able to work. Got to have childcare for people to be able to provide a spot for their families to go to work. So it's just it's going to take a lot of meetings and participation from everyone. So
you have 6 more trailers to move in, and how many families are actually there now? Do you have a number on that?
I think there's 5 families, and they'll be moving in probably like 5 to 10 a week there. So they're trying to organize all that. Yeah.
Good.
So I think there's over 300 families still in hotels.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at going from shelter housing to transitional housing to permanent housing. It's like I said, and you drive the 99 corridor, and I look at the spots where you get off the exits, and we have 7 to 10 RV small man camps set up. So there's challenges with housing on the east and west coast states of the United States, and it's going to be a problem that we're going to have to try and solve from that standpoint there as we move forward too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the things too that Talent's really looking at is how can we provide additional opportunities around duplex, triplex, fourplex, eightplex, 10plexes. We've gone away from that product. We used to have that product. When you look at what is affordable for people that whether you're a school teacher, a police officer, that product's disappeared. We need to be able to bring that more flexible product back into our communities. So that's something that's going to be important as we go forward in these conversations too.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're working with Kristen Mays actually at the City of Talent on how to promote some of those things, and some of the planning commission folks as well. There's some really innovative things going on in that missing middle piece within talent. So one other question, I heard that there was a business component to the gateway as well. Will there be some food trucks there at some point? Is that part of the plan?
Yeah, there's going to be a couple food trucks down there on the pod there, and we actually are going to be working on the next vision for the gateway and actually we've expanded the gateway. So if you look at, the gateway all the way comes up to all the way up to Talent Avenue, all those commercial businesses, all that was destroyed there. So we're really looking at redoing that vision, working on the workshops. We're doing workshops in January and February, we're engaging the community on that aspect. So it's a great opportunity to really rethink what that could be. It's an opportunity to look at the code, really, and the city's, been doing that. Kristen and Jordan have been doing a great job on that, and they've been looking at how they can make some more flexibility to create, ability to have commercial flexible space with either residential, and then in the future, as your commercial comes back, you can have that flex space into. And there's also some really good examples that have been done in other Oregon communities for us to be able to rely on and look at that as we go through that process there too. So
that's great. Thank you. I'd love to just have a conversation now around some other questions in terms of what do you see as the next steps in the economic recovery? And let's just do this as popcorn. We don't have to go around formally person to person, but if anybody has any thoughts on that, like what should we be thinking about as a community as the next steps in terms of economic recovery? And anyone, panelists first, but anyone can jump in.
So I have another slide. Can I just get through that?
Yes,
and some
course.
with me echo what Tucker has shared. Here's what is on my radar on what's next. And basically it's on my radar, so it doesn't have to be on yours. The $420+ million, $422 million Tucker has mentioned, that's coming to the state, that's actually going to have a more long-term focus, right? As we look at that marathon, not a sprint. There's already an available pot of money that counties and the cities know about. We carved out a part of or rather, we can allocate a part of our existing community development block grant for emergency related sort of community development things. So, perhaps the project comes around that. We can't recover without keeping an eye out for resiliency. So all the communities from Butte Falls to Shady Cove to Talon to Jackson County, there is a special pot of money out there to access match for hazard mitigation. And if you read the actual LTRG newsletter, you will see that Jackson County's revisioning for the Greenway, including a whole bunch of cities, that's going to be underway soon. I think we're going to see a new business formation trend, which will bring that opportunity for wraparound support, whether it's the existing people or a new chamber or new alliance. I think we're going to see survivorpreneurs balanced with those relocating into the area, just for that, blank canvas in a very resilient and very close-knit community. And we have to be asking ourselves, how are the cities or not-for-profits or organizations insured? One of the communities and organizations almost had their paper records for several decades, be exposed to fire. So we need to move forward in a way that's kind of future ready. And I know for myself, every single business visit that I'll be doing from now on, I'm going to incorporate a question. When is the last time you did a fire evacuation drill or an emergency evacuation drill? And full shout out to the LTRG group that invited me along on the visit to Paradise, right? Even prior to their disaster, they knew their zones. They had their magnets. People knew their zones. It was a very challenging situation, tragic, absolutely. But I don't know if people here know, what ward of the city of Medford they're in. I don't even know if evacuations follow that, but I'm going to ask every business or organization I meet with, what's your emergency plan? If you hear of evacuations in areas your employees live in, are you going to call them off the floor? That sort of thing. We have to start asking those questions. And I think we have a lot of opportunity around supporting entrepreneurs, survivorpreneurs, and those who will come in or rebuild, kind of like what Marshall and Tucker were saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta. I'm curious about the HUD block, the CDBG grants. What's the timing on those, and what's the channel through which the process and channels through which those will flow? Do you know?
Great question. I know right now, the state outside of my agency has internally been looking at how exactly to distribute it. That's why it's on my radar. So you don't have to track it, because the moment I know how and when and who, that's when I will send out a blast and hopefully include it in, R3V mailer. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. I heard that down like in Paradise, that took almost 18 months to really kind of get the whole plan in place and kind of get things flowing. So does that sound in line with what you've heard?
I haven't heard anything. I just know it's going to be probably 2022. I mean, this is a very large pot of money. I don't even know if, a brand new division or a team will be set around it. We don't know. It's a good question, but I mean, we do have resources for the now. So we know, whether it's 18 months out or more or less, we know what's coming, and we're going to take some time developing the guidelines around it.
Yeah.
But that's all I know.
Right. Yeah. So it's a huge pot, but we have to design a whole kitchen and recipe in order to be able to use it, it sounds like. But that's great. It'll be great for the long term. Anybody else thoughts in terms of what's next, or thoughts on this HUD money or anything else?
Marshall has his hand raised, and I
Yeah.
can go after him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you, Colleen. I just wanted to throw some support behind what John was saying. I think that if there's ever been an opportunity to look at planning and community participation, facilitation, visioning to develop a future, when you erase your business core and a fair portion of your housing, the only upside I can see, the opportunity, is to envision what you want your community to look like for the next 100 years and build toward that. So I think that the planning process right now and the community engagement is something that can be done immediately to galvanize support. And with that support, you never know what types of resources from the private sector and synergies can be built. So it's not just the public agencies that need to provide funding sources or block grants or anything like that. It's really the community participation piece that the opportunity lies right now, I think. So
That's great. Yeah, I think that in Joshua Lombard's kind of TGM project, he's built a lot of community engagement budget in there in time. So as those consultants, I think, get ramped up in the beginning of the year, we'll start seeing opportunities to speak as a community into that process. And that TGM is touching everything along 99. Basically, the fire followed what that's going to be working on. So that's, yeah, absolutely. It is wild to think that you have almost a blank slate or half blank slate in 2 towns in terms of business and housing, which is horrible and kind of an amazing opportunity. Anyone else thoughts on kind of what's next, kind of what we need to be thinking about as a community?
I'll just make a couple comments on the business side of what's next for us. We're very much implementers. If there is a CDBG program that comes out for businesses, we did some of that on behalf of Business Oregon before. And I don't know what the rules will be, so I have to wait for the rules, but it was a little bit complex and continues to be complex, because even if it's low to moderate income, if the owners don't actually, if the owners or the employees impacted don't actually live in that community, but may live in Ashland, it kind of throws them out. So we're waiting and hopeful that something will be a little bit more workable for the businesses and talent in Phoenix and Jackson County. The other thing I was going to say is that I mentioned that the Rotary put out some dollars, and we had established a wildfire fund also, and then we just kind of set it aside while we did that work. So we're going to be doing some fundraising, because we know that the grants to businesses, I'm still speaking for businesses, that went out to businesses were for businesses that lost everything. It didn't necessarily go to businesses that are still standing but lost their entire customer base. So as we're planning some new rules and things like that for our funds through the So Ready Foundation, we expect it to be available to businesses like the restaurants that are still open, that just lost their business space, small assistance. We're hopeful that portal will be open in January. We just need to do some fundraising for it. And then we're hopeful that it will be between $500 and $10,000 per grant based on the need and of course what we have available in the pot. So from our perspective here at Surready, that's what's coming next for us. In real tangible things that may get out the door. We do participate in meetings as much as we can. I do have a question though, Stefan, that you mentioned about some zoning changes, and I'm not aware of zoning changes. Can you articulate?
What I was talking about was the missing middle, where single-family residential zones now are available for multifamily development. If you've got the space, you can build multiple units, and that's happening. We heard earlier today on a call that's happening in Talent, especially where people are replacing what was a single-family residence with multiple units. So that's exciting to see some density.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And I just want to go back also to the basis of this meeting day is around fire response, not pandemic. Is that correct?
Well, it's all one.
It's all of
We
it.
had a
Okay.
bonus 2020, so it all has impacted our economic, development and recovery. So, yeah, it's all.
I may contribute a little bit more later. I'll continue. to
Okay,
listen.
great. Don Bruland has been very patient. He's had his hand up here for a little bit. So let's see what Don's thinking.
I guess I'd like to bring up, because I think we need to be very aware of the demographics of our area and the area that was burnt, which had a very high senior population. And I think as we rebuild, I hope that we and the cities and others look at the fact that building housing that will suit people as they age in place is critical. And it really doesn't cost more if you do it now. It's often expensive to remodel, to widen doors or make it so that a ramp's available, that we really do have an opportunity to deal with the fact that right now we're about 25%. In the future, what the demographics show is we're going to be 30 or more percent older people. And in terms of costs to services and stuff, having those homes so that people can maintain themselves without outside support really is going to be an economic advantage to our area. So I'll harp on that no more.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sounding that note. It's a real one. Bill Thorndike, what would you like to add?
Just a couple comments. I guess, building on Don Bruland's comments, and I think at one point in time, we attempted to loop into Pacific Retirement Services, but, we have one of the primary developers of senior housing for lower income organizations based right here, in Medford. And when I think of the possibilities, and again, they have a number of sites, PRS already has a number of sites in our valley. Of course, each one is a separate organization, but we might want to loop back to PRS. There's been, quite a changeover in leadership at PRS. But again, I think it might be worthwhile looking again at the possibility, because again, particularly if we have access to some better funding for federal funding of those types of programs that PRS has experience with, I think we'd be amiss if we didn't do that. Second comment is, and again, this is under the adage of knowing just enough to be dangerous. There is a developer who's coming up with a really big picture approach to changing low middle income housing. It's called Catalyst Communities. The guy's name is John Dunlap. He's been working with John Watt. Again, I'm still trying to figure out exactly what he's doing, but he's a local person who then moved to Montana. But he has spent a lot of money working with a lot of different groups in our area on identifying pieces of land that could be used and packaging a proposal in the range of $250 million of building like 700 to 800 units. So, and again, whether or not it's a dream or if it's beyond a dream, but again, the information that I've have access to, he is certainly doing some really interesting research on buildable land. He actually had a CSA, who's one of our best consultants in the area, analyze the entire valley for where you could potentially put those based on infrastructure, based on slopes of land, flooding, etc. So, but again, I don't know if it's still in the works. I don't think it's public information at this point, but if, I think it is something, it's public enough that I didn't have to sign a confidentiality agreement, and I know that they continue to do some work. But I don't know, Stephen, if you've heard anything else about the Catalyst community approach, or if anybody else on the telephone is aware of it. But again, at some point, we have to figure out how to link our groups in with that discussion.
What I can say is I know that there's some kind of due diligence work being done quietly to kind of vet the idea and see if that's something that we could support, because it sounds amazing. And we just have to kind of step by step figure out how we could if and how we could support that kind of a project. But it's great to know that there are people thinking creatively, because we have to change some variables or we're not going to get the housing that we need. Thank you, Bill. Karen, would you like to chime in? And then Dawn.
Thanks, Stephen. First of all, I just want to say how exciting it is to me to hear about the commercial sector. And thank you for this this subject matter for this particular meeting. Colleen and Terrell, really appreciate your attention to detail on this. It's been a long time, I think, since we've all joined you at your outreach events at the Phoenix Community Building, and you've been just doing amazing, amazing work. I really appreciate it. I feel like in my own organization, we are tracking commercial rebuilds across the state's fire hit areas, the affected fire from 2020. And the commercial sector has really lagged. I think what's happening in Jackson County is beyond anywhere else in terms of the support that they're getting to come back. And, I just really want to track this and tell this story, or somebody in this group, I hope will tell this story. So anyway, really kudos to this whole group and to the communities for doing so much for the commercial sector. Our communities are not communities without that commercial sector. So they are just so vital. So that said, I just want to make a comment on this world of funding and the money that is going to continue to flow from the federal government down to the states and into communities. And Marta, thank you also for just having such a great bead on all of this. And correct me if I'm wrong, at some point, but my understanding is that the CDBG, DR, and mitigation, disaster recovery and mitigation funding will at least primarily flow through OHCS. That's what I've read anyway, but and the big challenge for us for all of us is going to be tracking this funding and appropriately layering it for projects. What a huge task that is. I don't know that I'm up for it. I don't know that anybody's really up for it. There's a lot of layering to be had. And if we use it properly, we can put it to amazing good. So that said, I'll close with my last point here, and I'll have to drop off at 4:30 for another meeting, but Energy Trust will be holding a 1-hour webinar at 8 o'clock on Thursday morning, specific to people who want to rebuild single family homes, or their builders, or the cities, the planners, the permitters. We're being joined by Oregon Department of Energy and Building Codes Division to talk specifically to that audience about monies that we are all bringing to this table for those who are rebuilding single-family homes. There will be accelerated funding available beyond our routine funding. So I'll put my contact information in the chat. If you have access to that audience, rebuilders, builders, city staff, city and county staff, I want to reach out to all of them, and I've got some of those contacts as well, but I just wanted to put that out. There will be ODO and BCD will have their funding for that sector, I think, finalized by February. So you'll see at least the three of us working together to hopefully make it easy for single family rebuild. So anyway, good on everybody. Really an uplifting meeting. Thank you. Thank you all.
Great, Karen, thank you. And if there's any way that we can help get the word out around that, please let me know. And Christina Medina is talking in the chat about the Catalyst project and how it's a very innovative model that will require a bunch of public input and and scrutiny, I imagine. Thank you, Karen. So so I'm curious about kind of what we've learned, really over the last year. Here we are kind of towards the end of the year, and I kind of start reflecting on what have we learned this year. And so much has been going on in terms of economic recovery, even before the fires, right? We had COVID recovery. What have any of the panelists or anybody else feel like they've learned about economic resilience and recovery or our community over the last year?
I'll just share that economic development, at least from our perspective, is always a long-term proposition. We have projects, when I'm just talking about projects, like companies that want to be in the region, that started talking to us years ago, and they're still not here because the market has to play out or some process has to happen. And so I think it's not something new that I've learned. It's just what I've already known, is that these things are just slow. Just nothing happens as quick as we want it to. And I think the other thing that became for us very aware, I've become very aware of at this time, is that we still have a long way to work on better coordination and collaboration around things. I still feel there's a lot of duplication, and it will help us all to have clearer roles and understand who to communicate with quicker on things, so as not to confuse the customer, whether that's a business or a homeowner. So I think that's all of our interests, but I would say that we still have a lot to learn on how to coordinate better.
Absolutely agree on that one. Anyone else? Learnings? Marta, go ahead.
I learned that, I'm going to use the example of housing. If a region has not flexed and exercised a creative housing solutions muscle after the disaster, while it may be accelerated, that's not a good time to be exercising it for the first time. So that is to say, creative solutions for business support, housing, childcare incentives, I don't know. Whatever pain points we're trying to address, the time to be creative is now, before disaster recovery happens, before a disaster. And so I can only hope, because there are other regions impacted by other kinds of disasters like ice storms and things like that. I mean, we're learning it the hard way. It's great that creative ideas are coming out now, but imagine if we had a track of 10 years of creating housing projects, right? And so the status quo continued on, without huge waves of creative solutions. But yes, disaster is spurring a lot of it now, but in terms of other things, not just housing, now's the time to be creative, not waiting until the next something that hits to have to flex it all. Thank you.
So proactive creativity as a community, blended with the coordination, right? Sounds like you're reinventing R3V. This is what we're trying to do. it's a tall order though, for sure. John, what do you think?
Yeah, I just want to build on what Marta said, and something that I've been just testified a couple of weeks ago to the state legislature on is that we really need to develop a playbook, a recovery playbook, and especially around this housing challenges, because Oregon is a land plan state, and it's very challenging. And this is not going to be the last natural disaster we have, whether it's a wildfire or earthquake or just some type of drought situation. We're going to have more of these, right? And unfortunately, Oregonians are a collaborative group and we're able to work through. But to Marta's point, there's a time even more important than now is to really get that playbook done and get that in front of our League of Oregon Cities, in front of our Association of Counties, help other cities and organizations learn about the challenges that we went through, right? That's going to be something that'll be really important there. I wanted to step back to on the $422 million on the CBDGR funds. Talk to our good friend Brian Guinea, who heads up the Oregon and Idaho HUD programs there. There's going to be two notices that will be coming out for everyone to participate. There'll be a funding allocation notice and a universal register notice, right? So I think the more we can get some workshops together and reach out to the vulnerable, the minority populations, those businesses, and get organized and have a plan, so when those hearings are done, we're able to bring our groups there and be prepared for that and prepared for our ask. So I think that's something, as this group could move forward and have some of those workshops, reach out to that population and let's get organized. Let's come together with the plan. So when those fundings are available, we have our plan that we can make that ask. And that's going to better align for us to have dollars coming back into this region here. So those are some things that I see from lessons learned here.
That's excellent, John. And that's, I will reach out to you about that, because I think that that's a really powerful place. And the same goes for the TGM process, the Greenway design process. There's a lot of, I think, preparation work in our community to do to help people understand what those opportunities are and how to step into them, how to have your voice heard in that room. Anybody who would like to participate in that or feels like that's a good idea, please drop your name in the chat or just email me directly, and we can. I'd love to kind of rally around those moments. Anybody else in terms of lessons learned?
One thing you just mentioned the Greenway, and I think that Anne Marie was here with the Rogue Valley Council of Governments, but maybe she dropped off. But the Rogue Valley, is she still here?
I'm still here, Colleen.
I was just going to reference maybe you'd like to share that, the EPA technical grant assistance around the Greenway.
Yeah, so the FEMA and EPA were partnering on a technical assistance grant, and our collaborators in the Rogue Valley put in a letter of interest and it was approved. So I don't have the details yet, but essentially the partners in the region, spearheaded by Rogue Basin Partnership. I'm sorry, that was not the correct words. We have too many acronyms here. But our groups in the region, spearheaded by our Natural Resources Department, working in collaboration with the partners. And basically the technical assistance is going to further plans for the Greenway that were started after the Penninger fire. And obviously the scope changed. They had plans to remove a lot of blackberry along the Greenway, things like that. Well, the fire kind of took care of that, but then put in a whole nother slew of different things to think about, trying to manage the invasive species that are faster to come back after a fire, things like that. So the technical assistance that the EPA approval for technical assistance will help come up with a kind of Greenway globalized plan to recover. And there are so many community partners involved. They are going to hit any and all angles that they can with this. So, like I said, the invasive species, but then also taking a look at how the unhoused population is affecting the Greenway, and looking at, there's already been some projects for signage, bringing awareness to the wildfire danger along the greenway and things like that. So I'll keep the group informed and our other community partners as that moves along, but that's something kind of interesting that's happening and very timely. This is being done in conjunction with Steve Lambert at Jackson County, who is also knee deep in a big project involving the greenway. So we're coordinating on those efforts. So I'm hoping we come up with a really good plan moving forward. And then, of course, after that, we'll move into the phase of trying to figure out how do we pay to implement this great plan that we've come up with. So
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Thanks for joining us. That's great to know that that's coming, that you've got, thanks for applying for that, everybody who is involved. It would be great to have that technical assistance to help us harness all of this moment. Let's see, so anybody else with kind of lessons learned or how can we accelerate the recovery that we're seeing? It sounds like in terms of commercial recovery, business recovery, it's pretty slow at this point. Is there anything that comes to mind that how we might accelerate things?
Stephen, I'd go back. I don't know if Guy Tower is still on the line or not, but bottom line is if we could figure out a way to provide subsidized housing for entry-level workers and middle-level workers, to me, that would be the most powerful economic tool that So Ready or any of our communities could have to allow businesses to expand or to locate here. That if we had an available workforce that had the type of housing that all of us would want to live in if we were starting out, what an amazing tool that would be. So again, I would hope that maybe through So Ready or the chambers or economic development, really think about what, we all look at the demographics. Guy looks at them every single day, and you look out for the foreseeable future, and our workforce is shrinking. So how do we address that? Because if we don't, we either are going to automate all the jobs, or we're going to lose jobs in our region.
I heard one thing that was.
Okay, Guy, go ahead.
I was just going to say something not in Jackson County specifically, but a realtor over in Curry County, of the 158 homes that they sold in Curry County, he said, this is somebody being quoted, 4 of them were sold to local residents and the rest were sold from people coming outside the area. So, we're a victim of our own success in terms of people wanting to flock here with cash and, really crowding out people that are trying to start out here. So it's a big challenge, and I echo your sentiments, Bill. Thank you.
I was only going to comment that workforce has always been the #1 issue with economic development. For companies coming in or local companies growing, it's always the #1 concern.
And Colleen, earlier you mentioned that these projects have to pencil, and clearly I was talking to Alex Campbell this morning, and we were talking about attainable housing, and clearly the data is on the streets. It doesn't pencil out the way the model is currently set up. It doesn't. Nobody's developing for the local audience, local workers. So that's any thoughts on how do we turn that? Do we need to take the LIFT program, for instance, that's so good for affordable housing, and raise the limit to 120% of AMI and make that kind of a program available for worker housing? Are there other ideas for how do we make it so that we can, as Margaret Van Fleet says, set the table for developers to be able to come in here and build the housing that our workers need? Any thoughts?
We have been in conversations with Alex and others and some other development projects for different areas of housing also. And I don't have any new thoughts. This is not my expertise area. But it's like even for a business to do whatever they got to do, it has to pencil. So, and that's a big concern with everything that we're talking about right now is how do we get the businesses back to a place where they can thrive And part of it also, while I mentioned earlier, we need to help them, we also need to get out of their way. It's kind of ironic that I don't know how we do it. We'll help them and get out of their way so that they can just do it and let the private sector do what it needs to do. But I don't have any magic wand, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's really, that duality is really an interesting one, Colleen. Denise, would like to add something?
Yeah, I was in the chat, I was really, Colleen hit it on the head. The numbers don't pencil out. So the developers, it's going to cost them an X amount to build an attainable house, and it has to be priced at a certain point for an attainable household, and the numbers don't work. This goes on all over the country, and that's the developers have a gap. Something is missing. I mean, all of this money that is being put forth by the federal and state government for COVID recovery, for wildfire recovery, can be used to fill those gaps. That's a common thing in economic development and housing all over the place. Once you can figure out where the gaps are, and talking to developers, does the price of land need to be written down, or whatever it might be? Do households need subsidies to buy the properties, mortgage subsidies or down payment subsidies? That's pretty common, again, all across the country in all kinds of situations. There's plenty of money. The question is, again, how do you target it to fill these gaps so that the projects can be built, the developers can make their money, and the homeowners can get into it. So I think there's plenty of smart people, and in discussions with the development community, you can figure that out and design a program to address that. Not give away the farm, but it's places where a bank won't come in and finance. And so I don't think it's a hard problem to solve. I really don't. And other things come in, like Colleen said, with development review efficiencies and zoning and a whole bunch of things. But the financing piece, I don't think should be that hard. But again, you have to design a program to address what the need is and spend some time figuring that out.
I know the state is working on that, and how we could apply money to the question of attainable housing. Anybody who has any ideas, and you've just listed some good ones, but that seems to be the big one. John, what do you think? You're a developer.
Yeah, thanks, Steph. And I think one of the things that really we got to think about is, business recruitment it's tough to recruit a new business into the area. And we really need to focus on how we can work with those existing businesses and help them work through that process. So when you think about what are some of the technical assistant programs that we can offer to the businesses, to help them revision, re-see their new building, so what are some of grants and programs that we can either leverage ARPA funds or additional recovery funds to? Here, you can get a market study so you can see you can still capture the businesses, right? Or you can help redo your building and your permit expedited fees. Those are types of programs that we really need to have for these businesses to be able to see that door opening for them to be able to come in and want to rebuild, right? So those are things that we really need to think about trying to create, reaching out to those businesses. If they know they can go to the county and they got expedited permit fees that are going to be waived, and they got a ability to do some market studies and help on some 3D modeling, that's going to help keep those keep those businesses here to really start that process, right? Where they're sitting there thinking about maybe exiting right now. That's what we don't want, because it's harder to recruit a new business into this area, right? Because of the challenges. So we really got to push right now to create some programs and leverage some of these ARPA funds to be able to help these businesses go back through the rebuilding process. I know So Ready's got some great, programs going forward, but we just got to do some more workshops and create some more opportunities for these businesses to engage and see that pathway for them.
Thank you, John.
Colleen,
Yeah.
I don't know if you have a comment, but what I'm impressed is I'm starting to see a lot more cars at the Cummins facility, the old Walmart in Talent. And again, here was an opportunity for us to bring in very bright, talented engineers, et cetera, working on the batteries work for Cummins. But again, I guess I was just thrilled to see the parking lot full again. Do you have any perspective as to how they've dealt with coming back after the fire?
That question was directed to me, right, Bill?
Yep.
Okay. So a lot of their workforce has been remote because of the pandemic, not necessarily because of the fire. I know that they've grown dramatically. I don't know what the latest is in terms of how many are moving back in, but they look for really high skilled workers that come from outside of the area. So while we're all very concerned about affordable housing programs, many of those folks are also, we also lack other levels of housing in the region, which is what they look for, and the amenities of our region also. So right now many of them have the opportunity to work remote and continue to work remote, which works out okay right now for Cummins. But we do have a Cummins person on our board of directors. And I don't recall the number of employees currently, but I think they're getting close to 100 perhaps. Martha, have you any more recent than that? No, okay. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but it is a good company to have in the region. And I just want to clarify again for those on this call that Soreti's charter for over almost 40 years now has been to work primarily with traded sector companies. Those are the manufacturers. So, so when I say that the number one issue is workforce, that's what we hear from the traded sector for the most part, which is a little bit different than some of the things that we're considering here and a lot of the audiences that have been impacted. But if we could find a way as a state or as a nation just to get folks back to work in general, I think that will just solve some of the problems that we are experiencing right now. Let business do business again.
Yeah. Well, and again, we've talked about the number of people that move to our area that have their innovators. Bramo is the perfect example of that. And the great thing, Bramo developed a local workforce, even as, they sold Bramo up the chain. It's still pretty amazing the opportunities that we have of working with the innovators, but again, then allowing them to scale up to some degree, I think is something that we really want to make sure. And, as you brought out that, when you look at the opportunities, whether it's mountain biking or rafting or going to the mountains and stuff, we are an attractive place where, again, you don't necessarily have to live in Seattle or San Jose to be successful. So again, I don't think we should ever begrudge what we don't have. It's just trying to figure out how to develop what we can.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing to me how many really innovative people are here. They've chosen to live here. And so we've got all kinds of creative capacity here. Question is, how do we turn it into businesses like Bramo did, right? And create real jobs and develop that workforce. It's a really interesting question that Ellie is talking, and is it a workforce shortage or is it a wage shortfall? It's kind of, it's like a chicken or the egg and something else too, because housing, it's like, which came first, right? Or do we not have the workers that we need because we don't have the housing that they want to live in, as Bill was talking about, and or do we not have the jobs that are paying enough to let people kind of develop their skills and really make a career of their work? John, what do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Stefan. I think that, the other thing that we forget is we need to reach back into our high schools and our community colleges, right? We've gone away from developing trade programs that are really important, where you could go in, you could learn welding, pipe fitting, and we have to start reaching back into those high schools and making contact with those students at that age, because not everyone wants to go to college, and you can still out and have a good traded sector job. And we have to reach out to the high schools and start to develop those programs. and then work with the community colleges to make sure we create those feeder programs. That's real important, right? And especially with the innovation that's in the valley there. The other thing that I was able to do in some parts of the state that was really successful during the COVID was work with some of the community colleges and utilize some of the ARPA funds to set up some scholarship programs with the community college, right? So work with our community college. If you have folks that have, were in the service sector, but they were going to community college and they were trying to get that 2-year degree to become a welder, have some scholarships available to have them be able to buy the tools and finish their programs, right? So really trying to leverage and help build that workforce pipeline. And we're going to need that in the recovery opportunities. So we're going to have to, go back to talking to high schools, community colleges, helping shore up that programming element in there. And that's something we can do with the ARPA funds, is working with our high schools and our community colleges, creating scholarships, creating opportunities, and building that awareness for that pipeline.
That's an excellent point.
John, the RCC is using their ARPA funds, and they are not necessarily paying for tuition because it creates an issue with folks who have loans. So they've created a kind of a neat program where they will help pay the loans so that students can continue to take courses. But yeah, they are encouraging anybody who knows anybody who is interested in taking any classes to go to the RCC website. They are using their ARPA funds to help pay for classes. So you could actually have an opportunity to go through some of their credential courses and at no cost. So.
Oh,
That's wonderful.
That's a great opportunity. Colleen, what do you think?
Yeah, I was just going to add also to John's comments, which are spot on. We do need to have more interaction with high schools and colleges. And historically, that is something we do as already when we make outreach calls. We try to understand what the skills are needed. And when we identify a gap, we feed those back to our contacts at the various educational institutions. Pre-pandemic, we'd actually created a game of sorts where we did have what's called So Ready Quest, where we were introducing students in our region to companies that already exist here to help them become aware that there is opportunity here. And many of those are trades specific where you don't necessarily have to have a full college degree. Of course, that was pre-pandemic. So a lot of things have been put on hold, but we do recognize those needs. And I'm glad that John brought those up.
Great. Thank you. So we just have a few more minutes. Final question is, what other, we've talked a lot about this. So anything else to add around the challenges or opportunities you see in terms of long-term prosperity for the Valley? Talked a lot about recovery, but what are the challenges or opportunities long-term?
I can go ahead and add a couple things. A little bit of history. I've been with So Ready for 20 years. Just a couple weeks ago, celebrated 20th anniversary. Something that crosses my mind is that when I started with So Ready, I actually was a project manager for what was the regional investment program in the state of Oregon. And I think there were either 12 or 13 regions that corresponds with the economic development districts. And there was a separate pot of money that came through the state legislature to these regions, and a separate board of directors of which I was staffed to. So there's a So Ready board, and then there's this other board. And what I really liked about that program was the legislature had an allotment of money. I believe it came from lottery dollars, but it has been 20 years, that would go to all the different jurisdictions on a biennium basis, a 2-year allocation. And then that local board would assess the needs and issues of its region, which it knows best, from community development and economic development. When I started, I was managing 37 different projects. Some of them were like for OMEC, manufacturing extension partnership, some of them for RCC, and others were things like libraries and skate parks. So it was community development and economic development. and it was an allotment of money, and we had the control locally to decide what was the highest priority in the projects that were most ready to go. I bring that up because I think that that's an opportunity for us to explore again. It's like, how do we have more control in our region with the allocation of money to make the decisions so that things are streamlined quicker, perhaps. And I think that's something to consider in our long-term recoveries. How do we go back to a model like that or similar to that with a direct allocation to all of the regions? You already have economic development districts like already established who have loan programs, manage enterprise zones, do other things that they have the right skill sets possibly still to continue that work and do it effectively. So that's just a thought I'm putting out there that's been on my mind of late.
Thank you. And Marta, are you raising your hand or no?
Yeah, I think the recovering corridor is a perfect opportunity and spot to capitalize on the kind of like the dichotomy of Ashland and Medford's performing arts and culture scenes. They also have like a really good hustling and bustling of their own. I'm not just talking about Art Bop, but like also Art Bop, right? I think that's the name of the place. So arts and culture is a huge opportunity in terms of bringing the community together, but also economically. Additionally, Latinx community and other communities that were impacted, and it all intersects, right? So I'm hesitant to just put one group name on it. There's a lot of opportunity there. Find out who's doing something and let's support them. And it's a holiday season. If you're planning on treating your family, take them out to one of the recovering area businesses. If you're getting people in your office gifts, get them gift cards to businesses in the recovering area. Vote with your wallets. That may have more impact than any of us realize in 10 years. Thank you.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. I see so many packages coming in from Amazon into our communities, and it's just, it's hard, right? Sending all those dollars that would make such a difference to local businesses. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, thanks, Stefan. I want to, just build on what Colleen said, and I think this is a great opportunity for, Jackson County and So Ready, or to kind of really build on looking at what the employment lands are, because we're going to have actors that are going to leave, right? As we're talking to all these different landowners, but now's the time for us to really reach out to all these cities and understand the available land. This employment land is what is available as tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, right? So as a region, if we're going to be competitive, we really need to know within these cities what sizes, if we have a 5, 10, 20, or 40 acre parcel, and how long is that duration going to take? Is it going to take 12 months, 2 years, or 3 years, right? That's the different tier levels that we're going to run into to be able to go through and get the approval process. Now's the time, as we're going through this recovery process, let's really look at that regionally from the county standpoint. What do we have available in our communities, in our cities, and have that package ready? So when, that innovative manufacturer or whoever that is looking to expand or come into the area, we're able to assist them. And I think that's something that we should really think about, building that out over the next year to have that for people looking at, coming into this area.
And who would hold that data? I mean, there's so many.
I think that it really needs to be led by the county, right? So the county should really lead that, working probably with either So Ready or a team, and have some, consultant come in and help look at the different cities, within the Rogue Valley, look at the industrial employment lands, look at, how long is it going to take to get that ready, right? And normally a tier 1 is going to take you 12 months or less. And you can see that expedited process. Tier 2 is, you're into 2 years, 3 years. So really, I think you need to do that regional analysis there. And it's really going to help from a competitive standpoint to start identifying and working to understand those. But it needs, from my perspective, in other areas I've worked at, it's been led by a county, so county or a region, right? So that would be helpful from that standpoint. So,
Colleen, go ahead.
I think there is some work being done there already, John. The state of Oregon has the Oregon Prospector Database, which is what we use or when we're responding to prospects. We maintain a whole developer contact list to find those properties for the business. And I know you were speaking to business. Oregon Prospector, and then the Marta at Business Oregon has a colleague that does industrial lands also. But from a county perspective, that I agree, we need, there's something we could do. There's always something we can do. better.
Yeah, and what I've done in the past is, yeah, thanks, Colleen. What I've done in the past is, just really take a deeper dive to understand, what are the challenges with DEQ, what are the challenges with infrastructure, and we can put some numbers to that. And, so kind of working with the civil engineering, a couple different teams, you're able to really do some test fits, site fits to understand where the wetlands are. That helps to really understand that criteria. The Oregon Prospector kind of works like CoStar, but this would take a little deeper dive. And, if we did that over the next 2 to 3 years, that's something, as we're talking to these property owners, we can build that database, and it's really going to help in the recovery process from that standpoint. So happy to share some that I've done in some other areas with the group too. So
That'd be interesting if you could point us to some of that, John. That would be useful. We can put it up.
Yeah,
on the website.
And NAOP's a great supporter of this, so this is someone that would be helpful to, they bring in some good teams that I've used in the past in these areas. So that's something to think about from, that perspective too. So yeah, happy to share you some examples.
Yeah, that would be interesting as well, trying to set the table for developers of attainable housing in a similar kind of way, right? And maybe this is a place where we could get some of this money that's pouring down from above and put it to work in a way that kind of creates some long-term assets for us that we can turn into jobs and long-term prosperity. That said, we have 2 minutes. I think I'll, unless anybody has a last-minute comment, I will give you those 2 minutes back. Thank you all. This has been a very interesting conversation. I really appreciate your participation and all your good work.
Thank you all. Thanks, Stephen, for inviting me.
Thank you, Marshall. Thanks for being here.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Stephen, and
everybody.
everybody.